Hey guys, this is Coach Mike Ryan again from the Fastball USA Training Center, and this week the hit king passed away, Pete Rose, one of my favorite players of all time. And that got me thinking about what we talk about with our hitters and our baseball players here at Fastball USA during our mindset sessions. I even wrote about this a little bit in my book, but there's a few takeaways we could take from the hit king, and I think a lot of lessons there for both players and even parents who are trying to support their players. So let's start with this. And in an interview Pete Rose did years ago, he talked about how a dad asked Pete, hey, is there any tips you can give my kid and to become a better hitter? And Pete said, obviously, I've never seen your kid swing, but I can tell you this. The 3 rules you got to go by are, number 1, be aggressive. Rule number 2, be more aggressive. And rule number 3, never ever be satisfied. So again, be aggressive. Number 2, be more aggressive. And number 3, never be satisfied. So let's take a step back and think about that lesson there. Be aggressive. Okay, what does that even mean? As a hitter specifically, there's really 2 types of aggression, at least that we talk to our hitters here about at Fastball USA. Number 1 type of aggression is the type of swing you're taking. Take an aggressive swing. If you're going to swing, make sure it's an aggressive swing. Otherwise, don't swing, right? So part 1 of that is take an aggressive swing. The second part is have an aggressive approach. Don't get caught indecisive. Don't get caught taking pitches that you think you may or may not should be swinging at. Simply have an aggressive approach. Swing often, swing early is something we talk about here at Fastball USA. But that is reinforcing being aggressive, which takes me to another interview that he did back right around when he was about to set the record. And he was discussing his philosophy on hitting. And one of the things he talked about was his advice for coaches or for players, right, is to not to over-instruct the players on swinging at necessarily strikes. And what he talked about was if a player is swinging at a pitch that's a little bit high, a little bit low, a little bit in, a little bit out, let him do it as long as he's being aggressive, right? Because being aggressive is the number 1 trait to becoming a really good hitter. So as you can see in these separate products, he's dropping nuggets that seem really simple to people, but I think often get missed. And now here's why it gets missed. We talk about, and we use Pete's words to talk about what we call fueling the fire or throwing water on the fire. And it's called aggression. So parents, coaches, people around, and players, be aware of this. There are people around you every day that either are fueling your fire of aggression or they're throwing water on your fire of aggression. So picture this. You go up there and take an aggressive swing, an aggressive approach, and you swing at a pitch that's maybe eye high or over your head, and you take an aggressive swing and miss, right? Listen to the talk that happens between coaches and your teammates and maybe even your parent. What are you swinging at that one for, right? You get chastised for being aggressive. But what Pete's talking about, if you get a young hitter who's being maybe a little less selective, more aggressive, man, let him do that, because that's step 1 to being a good hitter. Don't be wrong, as you get older, you got to a little bit know the strike. You got to know the strike zone a little bit more, and that's a thing. But man, if you take away the aggression, like your player goes out there and he's trying to make a great play and he's aggressive and he drops the ball, we have to encourage that. We have to praise aggression as coaches, as mentors, right? As parents. We should praise that, because eventually he's going to get it right. And when he gets it right, he's going to be a better player than the others, because what are most of the other people doing? Throwing water on the fire of aggression, right? They're throwing water on the fire. When they get aggressive, they're saying, no, you can't do that. No, you did it wrong. You did it wrong. Don't do that. Don't throw water on a fire of aggression. Fuel the fire of aggression. So that's our first takeaway from the Pete Rose advice. Now, the second thing I want you to wrap your brains around is this. Pete Rose, over the course of his career, made, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's something like 9,700 and something outs. He literally made an out nearly 10,000 times. So can you imagine going to the plate and making 10,000 outs and then somebody considering you to be one of the best hitters in the history of baseball? Well, of course, that's the case when you go up to the plate like 14,000 times. You had 4,256 hits, correct? But there's a great takeaway there. Failure is guaranteed, right? It's how you come back from the failure, your competitive desire, that is really, really important. And that's something we learned from Pete. right? You saw a guy competing and competing and competing, and he wasn't perfect, and of course he wasn't the biggest guy, and he wasn't the strongest guy, and he wasn't the fastest guy, but he was maximizing what he had. The competitive desire stood out. So failing, right? Can you imagine a lot of parents, if their kid goes an entire game without getting a hit, right? They're in panic mode, right? Or sometimes the kid is so upset that he didn't get a hit today. Maybe he goes 2 games, 3 games without getting a hit. Pete Rose went to the plate nearly 10,000 times and did not get a hit. So while he did lead the world in hits, right? He had the most hits in the history of baseball. We know that. But he also had the most outs in the history of baseball. And there's several examples like that for the greatest players in the world. If you're going to be really good, remember this: failure is guaranteed. So it's about how you come back from the failure. Parents, coaches out there helping kids, I would suggest you kind of turn failure around to use it in a positive way. And this is what I mean by that, right? Because we can't avoid the failure. Encourage them to learn from the failure. And in this way, and this is what we talk about at Fastball USA, learn how to fail differently, right? So if you're struggling, be aware of how you're struggling, because oftentimes there's a pattern of your failure, right? You may be failing because you're early on a pitch. You may be failing because you're late on a pitch. And a lot of times there's patterns. You may be failing because you're hitting maybe too high of a percentage of ground balls, right? So failing differently, if you're that guy, is, hey, you know what? I'm okay if I fail for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 at bats, but I'm not failing hitting it on the ground. I'm going to hit the hardest, highest fly balls I've ever hit. And oftentimes when guys take this approach, this is where they find out how to adjust. So coaches, you're running practice, or there's lessons, or training, whatever is going on, build in seeing if your players can adjust before you go ahead and give them the answer. See if they can adjust, right? So if they're failing and they're popping up, right? First create the awareness, then see if they can adjust. Failure is guaranteed, but are you going to fail differently? I find coaches get frustrated with players that don't adjust fairly quickly, right? So players, one of the greatest things you could do for yourself is learn how to make adjustments, and that starts in practice. And then coaches, you have to foster an environment in which players are okay to fail and they want to be aggressive, and you're praising their aggressiveness, but then you want to create a system in which you give them a chance to make the adjustment, and then if they don't, then you step back in. At least that's how we do it here at Fastball USA. So rest in peace, Pete Rose, and again, one of my favorite players of all time. But so many players and the parents and the guys coaching this game today can learn a lot from Pete Rose, right? Be aggressive, be more aggressive, never be satisfied. Let the player be aggressive, even if he's not swinging at strikes. And understand, one of the greatest hitters who ever lived failed 70% of the time. He made nearly 10,000 outs, right? Even though he had 4,256 hits. The guy with the most hits made the most outs. This is Coach Mike Ryan from the Fastball USA Training Center. If you want more information, check out our website at fastballusa.com. Click on evaluation. You can do both in-person and remote evaluations. I look forward to meeting you, and stay tuned. More videos still to come. Again, this is Coach Ryan at Fastball USA.